Long before the cities rose and the lights of men drowned the darkness, there were places the living dared not enter. Places where shadows whispered and the unseen feasted on human flesh. In the forgotten village of Khasipur, one such terror still lingers. They call it the Khasipur Jinn, the Infidel Jinn. But in hushed voices, the villagers give it another name, the Man-Eater. This is not just a tale of fear. It is a warning. Once you hear its footsteps, once you hear it call your name, there is no escape. Asterisk, lest go midnight, in theAZ sturt story. Asterisk Man-Eating Infidel Jinn, Part 1. The night in the village of Khasipur had always been thick with silence, broken only by the croaking of frogs from the marshes and the occasional howl of jackals wandering along the barren fields. To outsiders, it seemed like an ordinary countryside settlement, far from the noise of the cities. But the people who lived there carried with them whispers, warnings, and fears that never seemed to fade. No matter how many years passed, it was said that deep in the northern edge of Khasipur, where the marshlands turned into dense, thorny woods, an ancient ruin lay hidden. Nobody could say exactly what it once was. A crumbling shrine, a forgotten fort, or perhaps a burial ground. But the villagers agreed on one thing. The place was cursed. Strange lights flickered among the trees at night, and travelers who wandered too far into the woods were never seen again. Children were forbidden to go near it. Adults avoided even mentioning it after dark, and those who dared to speak openly told of a presence that was neither man nor beast, neither angel nor demon. They called it the Khasipur Jinn, the Infidel Jinn. But in hushed voices, when no outsiders were listening, they called it something else. Khasipur, the Man-Eater. The arrival RF was not a man who believed in such tales. At 28, he had spent most of his life in Dhaka, immersed in city life, dismissing the superstitions of his village relatives. When his father died, Arif reluctantly returned to Khasipur to take care of the family's abandoned property. His father had been a stern man, never speaking of his past with warmth, and Arif had little attachment to the land or the crumbling house that stood on its edge. Still, inheritance was inheritance, and the city was suffocating him with debt. So he came back, determined to renovate the old house and perhaps sell it later. From the moment he arrived, the villagers watched him with a mixture of pity and fear. They greeted him politely but avoided lingering. Conversations died when he approached. Even his cousin Hamid, who met him at the bus stop, seemed strangely nervous. "You'll be staying in the old house?" Hamid asked as they walked the dirt path. "Of course," Arif replied. "Why shouldn't I?" Hamid hesitated. His eyes darted to the trees at the horizon, dark even under the afternoon sun. "It's not safe after sundown. The house is too close to the marsh. People don't stay there anymore," Arif laughed. "Because of ghost stories." Hamid lowered his voice. "Not just stories. People go missing, even animals. My neighbor's cow was dragged away last winter. They found only blood on the grass. Nothing else." Arif shook his head. "Wolves, jackals, maybe smugglers, but jinns, that's nonsense." Hamid said nothing. His silence was heavier than words. The first night in the old house was uneventful, or so Arif told himself. Dust covered everything. Spiders had spun thick webs across the ceiling beams. The house smelled of damp earth and rotting wood. Still, it was standing, and with some effort it could be restored. He unpacked a single suitcase, lit a kerosene lamp, and cooked a simple meal. The wind outside was strong, rattling the shutters. Occasionally, the frogs and crickets would fall silent all at once, as if holding their breath. It gave Arif an odd feeling, but he dismissed it. After midnight, he lay on the creaking bed and closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was thick and dreamless. Still a sound pulled him awake. Dot, thud, thud. Thud it came from outside, rhythmic, heavy, like footsteps in the mud. Arif sat up, straining his ears. At first, he thought it was a villager, or maybe Hamid checking on him. But the sound was wrong. Each step was too far apart, as if the legs making them were unnaturally long. And they circled the house, slow, deliberate, pausing at each wall. His mouth went dry. He wanted to shout, to ask who was there, but his voice stuck in his throat. The footsteps stopped just outside his window. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then tap, tap, tap. Long nails saw a claw scratched lightly against the wood. Not enough to break it, just enough to let him know something was there. Arif held his breath. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the sound moved away, fading into the distance. When dawn broke, he found nothing outside. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. But the shutters of his window bore 3 faint scratches, deep and parallel, carved into the wood, as if by talons. Warnings. The next day, Arif went into the village to buy supplies. He tried to forget what he had heard, but unease gnawed at him. At the marketplace, old women whispered when he walked past. One muttered, "He doesn't know. He doesn't understand." Finally, Arif confronted Hamid. "What is everyone hiding? Why do they act like I've done something foolish just by staying in my own house?" Hamid sighed heavily, because the jinn does not like strangers living near its place. It marks those who disturb its territory. Arif scoffed. "And how does a jinn mark someone?" Hamid glanced at Arif's hands. "Sometimes with scratches, sometimes with dreams. Sometimes it comes at night and only watches, waiting." Arif froze. He hadn't told anyone about the scratches on his window. "That's ridiculous," he said quickly. "You're trying to scare me." But Hamid's eyes were grim. "If you hear footsteps again, don't look outside. And whatever you do, never answer if it calls your name." Night terrors. The second night was worse. Arif lay awake, listening to the wind. Midnight passed quietly. For a while, he thought nothing would happen, but then a whisper, Arif. It was soft, almost tender, spoken like a friend or a lover. He sat up, sharply, heart racing. "Arif." This time, it came from the door. A woman's voice, low and coaxing. Against his better judgment, he stood and crept toward the door, lamp in hand. The voice came again. Arif opened the door. His fingers brushed the handle. Then he remembered Hamid's warning. Never answer if it calls your name. Cold sweat trickled down his back. He stepped away from the door. The voice grew sharper. "Arif, open it." He clenched his fists, refusing to move. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of rotting flesh. Something scratched the door, slow and deliberate, like claws dragging. Downward dot, and then silence. The stench faded. The scratching stopped. The voice was gone. But when morning came, Arif found the doorframe splintered, as though something had pressed against it with enormous strength, trying to force its way in. The old man's tale later that day. An old man approached Arif outside the market. His back was bent, his beard long and white, his eyes cloudy with age. "You are your father's son," the man rasped. You don't know what blood runs in your veins. Arif frowned. What do you mean? The old man leaned closer. Your father made a pact many years ago when he was young and foolish. He called upon the Khasipur Jinn for wealth, but the Jinn is never satisfied. It takes its price in flesh. That is why your father left this house. That is why no one dares live there. Arif shook his head. That's madness. My father was a hard man, but he didn't believe in such things. The old man's lips curled into a bitter smile. Believe what you wish, but know this, the Jinn remembers bloodlines. If it could not take your father, it will take you. Arif laughed nervously, trying to brush off the warning. But deep inside, unease rooted itself deeper. That night, as he locked the shutters tight and lit every lamp in the house he could not forget the old man's words, and when the whispers returned closer, louder, more insistent, he knew the nightmare was only beginning.